All right, so everybody should be able to see my screen. Um, with today being Monday, I am going to cover the whole Forex Factory calendar and kind of talk about what the implications of things are for the week and give you guys some tips on things to look for. With the news, I am not going to cover every single news item, just the main ones. So in the morning for the GBP, we have claimant count change. So think of this as being NFP somewhat. Almost think of it being like the unemployment number for the GBP. So that number comes out in the morning at 2 a.m. We also have the unemployment rate and then average hourly earnings. So it is somewhat like their NFP. It just doesn't move their economy as much as it moves and rules ours. Another thing that is yellow, but it's very important, is the economic sentiment for the euro. So we have general euro economic sentiment and the consumer sentiment for Germany. Those are somewhat similar to the consumer sentiment that we typically look at for the US. They're slightly different, but somewhat the same. Wednesday is going to be the very important day. Wednesday's news starts Wednesday morning and just carries throughout the whole entire day for things that we trade. So London session, Wednesday morning, we have consumer price index year over year coming out for the GBP. It's year over year, so when we look at it, it's going to be a COVID versus non-COVID yearly time frame. So make sure that you pay attention to that, keep that in mind with the GDP. Then later on in the morning at 8:30, we have retail sales coming out for the United States. Again, these numbers are important because shopping and spending money drives our economy. We have oil inventory news coming out Wednesday. Wednesday, or by that time, we should know about Hurricane Sally hitting or making landfall around the Louisiana area, somewhere between Louisiana and the Florida Panhandle. So because the track for Hurricane Sally is a little bit more east than other hurricanes that have hit that area this year and then late last year, you don't have to worry so much with oil production, so much as oil. You don't have to worry so much with oil as much as gas. So we'll be looking more at gas prices, natural gas, and we'll be looking at just the implications and the impact of a second hurricane hitting that area, because not only are we just looking at oil and gas, we're looking at what kind of economic impact is that going to have for other items that come out of that region, not only oil and gas, but also what is the government's response going to be if damages end up being really high. And if the government has to respond, then obviously it's going to be somewhat of a stimulus type deal. Not so much that they're just getting money and don't have to pay it back. This will be funds that will be allocated out of the government budget to go to those families and those hit to help them rebuild and help them repair. So it would almost to them be like a stimulus, but it will be like FEMA funds. Some in the form of like grants and just money that they get, others in the form of loans, but it'll still be money nonetheless that they get. But Wednesday, the super important news, the news that everyone is currently waiting for, is Jerome Powell and the Fed. So we really want to pay attention to these economic projections. These economic projections are going to tell us how the government feels about our economy, how the Fed feels about our economy, where both see it going. It's going to talk about the implications of interest rates being low over a period of time. They're going to talk about digital currencies, because this could possibly be Jerome Powell's last time talking to us as Fed chair. So whatever gets put into place, whatever gets implemented and voted on by the Fed, it will be. These are things that the next Fed chair is going to have to deal with. We've seen it happen with the euro. So when Mario Draghi left, Christine Lagarde had to pick up a lot of the policies and stuff that he voted on, written into place. And, the same thing's going to happen here if Jerome Powell doesn't get his seat back. So from 2 o'clock, I'd say from like 1:30 to about 4 o'clock, we're going to have a lot of volatility with the US dollar, because there's a question and answer session after this press conference at 2:30. The press gets a chance to ask questions. The answers, because some of the questions are submitted ahead of time, some of the answers are scripted, some of the answers are not scripted. Those of you who are familiar with Jerome Powell know that he stumbles and staggers, and he is obvious when he doesn't have a real answer and he just needs to come up with something on the fly. The market has learned this and has picked this up, and the market moves around these types of things. So it's quite possible that, because this could be a longer press conference and not all the questions had a chance to get reviewed and had an answer written for them, that you could have questions asked that could kind of throw him off. So pay attention. Like, if you can't pay attention to trades on Wednesday, I'm not going to tell you not to trade, but I am going to tell you to protect your account. Make sure you have tight stop losses. Make sure that you have take profits in place if that's what you want to do as well, because the market's going to move. Then that night, the New Zealand dollar has GDP news coming out, and this quarter over quarter is this year. So we're going to see how well the New Zealand economy has actually progressed through COVID, how well their economy is doing, how well they have done with producing items and making money for themselves. Then at 9:30, we have the Australian dollar coming out with their employment news. So we're getting tons of employment news on Wednesday. And I'll tell you guys a little bit about Australia whenever I finish up with the Forex Factory calendar. But we do get that news. It's going to be high impact, just like our economy. Their economy is very centered around have a particular structure like the UK does when it comes to their employment. So it's super, super essential. And Japan has a monetary policy statement coming out. It's super important because they do have a digital cryptocurrency that they're using. The citizens are using it. So we want to hear how that's going. We want to hear about the how the central bank plans to leverage, keep, or get rid of U.S. treasuries that they have, because Japan has recently gotten rid of a lot of treasuries that they held. And then also how they plan to keep their status as a safe haven, because right now Japan is not doing a great job of keeping that status. They're borderline being a safe haven currency. You can still put money into the Japanese yen, and it will still be better than putting your money into the dollar. However, not by much. Not like it used to be, not like it was in January or even late February, early March when we were talking about it. So moving on into Thursday Thursday is going to be another news heavy day for the US and for the GBP. That BOJ press conference that you see goes along with that monetary policy statement. Most countries, anytime they have a statement, they have a press conference that goes with it. If not that day, the next day or sometime that week. The GBP is going to vote on their bank rate. So we'll get a chance to see how they voted, see what the rate is, and then hear what their outlook is on their bank rate. Another important number that we're going to be getting on Thursday is going to be the Philly Fed manufacturing number, because of the impact of the Philly Fed in the United States and the manufacturing that comes out of that region. That number is going to be super important. And then we also get unemployment claims. And Friday, we have core retail sales and retail sales, not only from the GBP, but also from Canada. And then we get consumer sentiment numbers that come out for the United States. So we're going to get bank rates. We're going to have a huge speech from a central bank official, retail sales, and employment numbers coming out this week. So we have a lot of things to kind of center our attention around. The main thing you want to take away from this week is how well are the economies of these countries doing right now. It's September. We're halfway through September. In the US, we're getting ready for an election. In these other countries, they're trying to figure out how they're going to survive, get through COVID, and thrive again. The UK is also dealing with Brexit. So keep that in mind, because you could possibly hear talks of a vote, talks of the UK and the EU getting along or not getting along sometime during the week. So the news I was going to tell you guys about Australia is that, first of all, hopefully you guys know and realize that a lot of the news that we get here in the United States is not always how things are. We can see that with how they portray Brexit. We can see that with how they portray Africa, how they portray parts of Mexico. So the news that has come out of Australia has been very thin, hasn't been there. I've looked for some news. All the news articles just talk about gold. They don't really talk about the economy all that much. They don't really talk about the people, don't really talk about immigration, things that you would know would help to make an economy move. So I asked a friend of mine, and I was reading some articles today that they sent me, and it's horrible in Australia. Like, the way that they're treating a lot of their citizens is completely horrible. So if you think about some of the ICE camps that they've portrayed on TV and shown, where it's people locked up, don't really know like what the conditions are like, how much they're getting fed, how much water they're getting. Imagine having your government like section off huge buildings within the country and moving immigrants there, migrant workers, and forcing them to stay. Like, they can't go home, can't leave. You know for a fact that they're not getting treated well because the government tells you they're not getting treated well. And you have like a humanitarian crisis almost going on, and we don't even know it. So when we look at these Australian numbers and all these things coming out for Australia this week, especially the employment change and unemployment rate, for that reason, I'm really going to be paying attention to those numbers, considering the fact that they aren't allowing migrant workers in. They cut off the program in Australia so that even if you have a UK passport now, a Canadian passport or a New Zealand passport, anything that has the Queen attached to it, you used to be able to just come into the country, apply for a job, and you were good. They cut that off. So now you literally have to go through this really long process to get jobs. People that did have those types of jobs and passports, they kicked them out of the country. So I want to know how that affected their employment numbers. Obviously, we know, considering the sources of these numbers, anything can happen, anything can be manipulated. But for the most part, when Australia announces or puts out news, it's true. New Zealand recently had some numbers that came out and they weren't good. They weren't that good. Um, their numbers for the economy, for they call it consumer satisfaction, they were horrible. So I just want to be looking at, paying attention to what's going on with New Zealand and Australia, and then also Brexit, because don't forget, Brexit is going to have an impact on New Zealand and Australia because they're like sister countries with the UK and had that back and forth agreement about jobs and immigration and such. So that's why I want you guys to pay attention to Brexit. Told you guys that information so that you can pay attention and have a grasp for what to look for these employment numbers. Also for the GDP of New Zealand. And I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions?